Hello and welcome to the Bestseller Experiment, where we continue to discover what makes a bestseller and inspire you to start, finish and publish your book. I'm Mark Stay.
And I'm Mark DeVoe. And if you've been with us for nearly the last 7 years, can you believe that, Mr. Stay? 7, the magic number. Or maybe this is your first ever. You've been like searching around on podcast land and you've just stumbled across us today. We want to welcome you all to today's podcast. And we're going to tell you right up front, this is going to be massively, massively inspiring. If you've ever needed a bit of a little extra boost this week, this is the podcast for you. But before we dive in, we'd like to say thank you to all of our patrons that support this podcast and our Bestseller Academy members, our Academates as we call them. We are so grateful to everyone who is part of that group. It's such an amazing, amazing group of people. And
indeed they are.
If you're interested in finding out more, well, you know where to go, academy.bestsellerexperiment.com. So, Mark, we've got some very exciting news to share, haven't we?
Really, really special interview coming next week. Next week marks 7 years of the podcast, if you can add them and leave it. 7 years. And I did an interview recently that was really powerful, really, really moving. And it's with the remarkable author, Heather Morris, who is the massively international best-selling author of The Tattooist of Auschwitz, which is an extraordinary novel. We talk about how that came about, but she also has a new book called Sisters Under the Rising Sun coming next week. Really good interview. You'll hear a point in that where I almost start blubbing. It's powerful stuff. Don't miss it, basically, in short.
Brilliant. So, Mr. Stay, how's the come down been after a couple of weeks of the book coming out?
It's been very nice, actually. I've been getting very nice comments, reviews. Reviews are coming in, and people are liking it a lot, which is really nice. And the other thing I've got is I just learned the other day, completely by accident, no one told me, but Unwelcome is now on Sky Cinema in the UK. So yeah, going to get lots of eyes on that. Which is nice. So it's bit of a double whammy. So yeah,
that's
but I just got my head down. I'm working on book 5 and another book, and I'm editing another book, and I'm putting together a pitch. I'm doing a lot.
So just an average week in Mr. Stay's world. Now with publishing books, we've heard a lot of times, people who've, especially when they're publishing their first book, it's such a massive build up. I mean, we went through the process, didn't we, with, Back to Reality, but, there's such a big build up and then there's the bigger launch. And for a lot of people, there's suddenly this, a bit like, performing a theatre production. There's a lot of work goes into it up front. And then once it's out there and it's, it's done, so to speak, in terms of the books available, there can be a bit of an anticlimax. But it sounds to me like, because you've done this enough times now, the process, that you're in for the long haul. It's the beginning of the marketing of the book, isn't it? Rather than it hasn't sold 3 million copies on its first day of launch.
I remember when I passed my driving test and my instructor said to me, "Well done," he says, "but this is just the beginning. Every day you're going to be learning something new, and every day." So, and it's kind of like that. It's, you have a bit of fun with the launch day, and it was great fun. And and I found out those stones, we were asking about the stone on the staff last week.
Yeah.
It's a hag stone. And the hag stones, they're stones with little holes eroded in them that if you hold them up, you can see fairies and witches and stuff like that. So, Raven gave me an update on that. I had a very long message from her explaining all about it. But yeah, it's hag stone. So I did find out for you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Any news on the nonfiction thing? Tell us about that.
Yeah, actually, I tell you what, Mark, nonfiction is so different from writing fiction. And one of the big things that I've been working on this week is a process that I've been doing a lot in other areas of my life, which I call reverse engineering, which is kind of, rather than starting at the beginning and try and get to the end, I'm starting not even at the end of the book. I'm going way beyond the end of the book and what I would like the book to create out in the world and what kind of things might happen, and planning all of that stuff. So it's sitting there, not ready and waiting. Now I know what you're going to say.
This sounds like procrastination to me. This sounds like someone doing their world building before they actually do the writing.
It would be procrastination if I wasn't doing any work on it. But honestly, I've been doing so much thought process around it, like filling up. I'm almost like second notebook.
Processes. But are you actually putting pen to paper?
All kinds of stuff, Mark. Pen to paper, yeah, writing stuff. But logo designs.
Don't make me go Aronovich on you. you.
No. I want you to. That's what I need. No, but the interesting thing is, non-fiction is so different from fiction writing. Like, there's a whole, like, I'm developing a logo for this brand of what the book's going to become. I've already registered the URL because it's going to be more. The book is like the gateway into this world, that I'm trying to create, and so I need to see. This is just how my mind works, and I think it works for some authors as well. Is that you need to see the bigger picture. You really have to visualize what's coming down the road, because that totally changes how you write the book and how you plan the book. And I've done this in so many, a bit like the Academy in some ways. I remember when we started even before we started the podcast, I was already talking about, I really want to build this academy where people come in. Do you remember that? Like, we talked about that before the first episode, and it was many years of kind of seeing it, planning it and growing it and then launching it that made it happen and made it work. And so I've just found in my life, this is something I've done in every business I've started, every venture I've been in. And it's just how I work. It's like I need my GPS coordinates of knowing where I'm heading. And then it's going to be, I'm going to waste a lot less time when I actually sit down. And I've got so much stuff. Honestly, I dictated, I don't know if I told you this or if it was in the Academy coaching, but I dictated 2,500 words on my phone that I had written in rough draft in the book, and I dictated it into a Google Doc in less than an hour. Its spelling was so much better than mine. Just the lack of editing that I'll have to do. So I'm going to be sharing in the Academy like this, how you can use, there's some hidden features on the iPhone that not many people know about, which are way better than just that button that you press. There's a mic button you press.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something hidden in here I've discovered, which is absolute gold dust. So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what I've been using that for. So yeah, big adventure right now. Very excited. And in November, we've got Kate Harrison coming into the Academy to coach our new non-fiction writers. So there's if people are interested in joining me, we're looking for about 12 people to join. Like, it's going to be like Robin Hood and his merry men. Writing this book, writing your book alongside me writing my book. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. So jump over to the Academy and check that out.
Good stuff.
Now, one thing that's very inspiring that we've seen a bit of, but this is probably one of the most inspiring stories we've had around this, is this idea of what we like to call late bloomers, or people that make the most of the opportunities they've got. And today's interview is absolutely no exception, is it?
Yeah, this was such a great interview. This is Julie Owen Moylan. She's a novelist and filmmaker. Her graduation short film, BabyCakes, scooped Best Film at the Swansea Film Festival, where Ken Russell was a judge. And Ken Russell strikes me, he was a very hard man to please. So that is a hell of an achievement. She's also written 2 novels, That Green-Eyed Girl, which came out in 2022. And just this summer, she released 73 Dove Street, which has been getting the most amazing reviews. And you'll hear in the interview, I was given a proof copy by the publisher, and I gave it to my mum. She's loving it, absolutely loving it. So Julie and we discuss thinking visually and using images as inspiration, why it's the smallest details that can make all the difference in fiction, and how Julie's tiny, weird obsessions ended up being liberating.
Brilliant. So let's dive in and listen to Mark chatting with the inspirational Julie Owen Moylan.
Julie Owen Moylan, welcome to the Bestseller Experiment. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Lovely indeed. Certainly a bit better than London in 1958, which is the setting of 73 Dove Street, which now I was fascinated by this because my Irish grandparents came over to London around about the same time. And in the publicity material that was sent over, there were photos by a photographer called Bert Hardy. And there's one of a woman standing on what I think is Waterloo platform in a coat and hat. She's holding a couple of bags. And it's just made me think of my nan. She's looking a bit lost. Tell us about this book and what inspired it and those photos.
Well, the book is basically the story of 3 complicated women, Edie, Tommy, and Phyllis. They're all kind of haunted by their past, and they're all carrying secrets. And their lives collide at this extremely shabby boarding house in West London, which is 73 Dove Street. And it's really a story about the resilience of women, and particularly of working class women. And I really wanted to kind of pay tribute to the women that came before. I mean, I dedicated this book to my grandmother, and it was really just thinking about that kind of generation of women and the generations that have come since that lived in a world that had so few rights and had to really make their own way.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be given a proof, which I'm sending straight to my mum. She is going to love this. She's absolutely going to love this. So, tell us about the structure of this as well, because it's set in London, 1958, but there are constant flashbacks. 2 years earlier, 2 weeks earlier. Tell us about that structure and why you chose to do that.
Well, I wanted to tell the story of these three women coming together, but I also, in order to do that, needed to tell the story of how Edie came to arrive at 73 Dove Street in the first place. So I structured the book so you have one chapter in the present day of October 1958 and the other chapter in 5 years before, 4 years before. So that kind of, the flashbacks act as a kind of countdown back to the present day. So I did that. First of all, almost accidentally during the first draft that just falls out of your writing brain and you go, where did that come from? And then when I was sitting in that first process of editing, I thought, oh, this could be a countdown. This could actually increase the dramatic tension in the structure. This is a good thing. Let's do more of this.
Excellent. So it sounds to me like you're not much of a planner. You are discovering these characters. You're discovering Edie and Tommy and Phyllis as you're writing. You're getting to know them. Is that your process?
I have been very proudly a pantser for my first two books.
Right.
I usually think about the characters for quite a while before I start writing. So there's a gestational kind of period. And when I feel I've really got them, then I go. I often have a vague ending. I see it like a movie, and I usually have like a final scene often. So I know, I often compare it to kind of driving at night in fog with a bit of a dodgy headlight. I vaguely know where I'm going, but I can't see the road. Yeah. And I have no idea the twists and turns. Now, the book that I'm currently working on, because I am currently in the middle of first draft on book 3, I have actually done a detailed plan for.
Oh.
And this is really interesting because I've never worked to a plan before. And yesterday, my characters just took a left turn. And now I'm looking at the plan and going, oh no, it's a plan.
Yeah, I hear you. I've been there. I've definitely been there. I'd like to go back a bit because you were saying there's this gestation period where you're thinking about your characters, and and I know what that feeling is like. You kind of do you sort of get to what feels like a tipping point where you think, aha, I can write this. And when do you know it's the right time? Is it when you have that vague ending, or is there something about the characters where you think, okay, I know who they are now?
Well, I have obviously thought about them and been doing kind of research around the period and looking at photographs and movies and all this kind of things. And I've got names and they kind of autobiographical details about these characters. The feeling of when to go is a really strange one. And I can best describe it as a kind of a fullness, really. It's, I mean, I've never had children, but I imagine it's like, you are about to drop. There is no further. You have to get this thing out of you. There is no future in you just, getting larger and larger. And so there is that kind of creative fullness where I just feel, yes.
Yeah.
And it's almost like being, I describe it as like kind of stepping into the character so that I know that I'm no longer outside watching them. I'm inside them. Mm-hmm. And I can feel what they feel, and they're going to do things that I'm no longer responsible for. And that's
Brilliant.
lovely. That's a lovely feeling, because then it's real. And then hopefully you've got characters that people are going to go, oh my goodness, when I read this book, I still worry about them. I want to know what happened to them. And I think that's great. I did my job. They're alive somewhere out there in the world.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant answer. I want to talk, you mentioned photos and movies there. We mentioned the Bert Hardy photos. Where did you encounter those? What did they inspire the book, or were they sort of fuel while you were writing?
I've always loved that kind of street photography, whether here or in the States, because I set my first book in New York and I used a lot of street photography to get that kind of vibe as well. So it's always something I've really loved. But I'm quite a visual processor, and so I run my books almost as movies in my head as I'm writing them. So I find photographs, documentaries, movies, anything that's visual, like kind of petrol to the fire. It's kind of like, oh, yes. I often find an image, and sometimes it actually, I can go, yes, that's the character, that's Edie, or that's Tommy, that's what they would be like. Yeah. And I can go from there and I can kind of breathe life into them. I just find it incredibly helpful to have those visual cues all along the way.
Do you store them anywhere? Do you have like a Pinterest board, or do you a file or anything where you keep them, or do you have them pinned above the computer, or what?
I keep interesting ones. I mean, I usually just kind of, Google for images and then I will save them. And so I can go back and have a look and try and pick up the kind of tiny details of them. The other thing that I often do is I read fiction that was written in that period that I'm trying to write in. And because I see visually as I read as well, then I am forming that picture, and I'm getting those tiny details that often you can't get. They get lost in history books and things. But if someone's written something, they don't even know they've done it. Often they haven't done it deliberately. It's just a normal part of life. Yeah, it's like we might talk about Zoom calls or something in a book, and in 100 years' time, people may not know what that is even. So it's those little day-to-day details, isn't it? And you will only get that in fiction written at the time or film set at the time, because my stuff is set in the 1940s, and it's just trying to find out how much a round of drinks was in a pub, little things like that. It's really difficult to look up, but if you come across it in a book or in a film, it makes all the difference. I used to have a friend who loved reading historical saga books, and I would say, what is it about these that you love? And she would say, it's things like, it would be the number 10 bus from Clapham Junction or whatever. It's those little details that make all the difference. Gold dust. It's absolute gold dust to writers.
Complete. Now, you've sort of answered my next question, which is one of the things I love about this is that sense of authenticity, particularly in the descriptions and in the dialogue as well. The dialogue is so strong. It's so vivid. And was it a case of watching movies from and were there any particular books or films that inspired you?
I watched a lot of great kind of kitchen sink drama movies, all the classics. So Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, A Taste of Honey, The L-Shaped Room, Poor Cow, all of these fantastic things. And the dialogue, I mean, you get a kind of sense of it from watching movies or reading, contemporary fiction from that time. But it comes from the characters, really. I think once you're inside those characters, you know that the way they're going to talk, and particularly with working class women, because I grew up on a council estate, I come from a working class background, I could write them from inside that community, not from a middle class writer's perspective of maybe looking outside that community and trying to understand what they're like.
Yeah. No, I come from a working class family as well, and it's not that kind of Lord Lover Duck stuff that you get where it just makes you want to cringe.
Exactly. The women in my family did a lot more than curtsy and say yes sir, no sir.
Exactly.
That's not how working class women talk at all.
Definitely not.
Definitely
not in my family. Let's go back to you. I want to talk about your careers day at school, because I found this in an interview that you gave where you wanted to be a writer, But the whole concept of being a writer, from your point of view in the world at that time, just was a crazy thing. So tell us about your careers day at school and where you ended up after that.
Yeah. We had, I think it was one careers day. We didn't have a sixth form in my school. Then nobody ever thought there was any need for that, really. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do at all. I was very creative as a child, and I loved writing, and I used to put on little plays and do all of that kind of thing. And I couldn't see anywhere around me that kind of a career. And I just knew that, I had to leave school and get a job. That was quite important. We needed the money. And the careers teacher was our kind of physics teacher, was a kind of very brusque, no-nonsense kind of chap. And we were in this line getting closer to this person that I didn't like all that much, to be honest. He scared me a bit. And the girl in front of me said she wanted to be a hairdresser. And I thought, well, that sounds quite creative. Okay, I'll say that. And that's what I said. And that's what I ended up doing for a couple of years.
So you wanted to say writer, but you were kind of too scared or too apprehensive to say it, so you went with hairdresser.
I just knew it was pointless. I knew if I said writer that they would just look at me as if I was mad. I might as well have said, I'd like to be an astronaut, please. They would have gone, no, that's not for you.
But here we are, you're, 2 books critically acclaimed, and you're working on your third. You must have overcome that somehow. Tell us about the journey from being too frightened to call yourself a writer to being this amazing writer.
I did what I think a lot of women do when they get to midlife, was I started to kind of reflect on what I'd been doing. I did eventually find my way to university as a mature student. I took a well-trodden path for a lot of working class women, was went into teaching. And I did that for quite some time. And then when I was about to come up to my 50th birthday, I was kind of looking back and thinking, well, okay, this has been reasonably successful for a girl from a council estate, but there was part of me that I felt I'd abandoned along the way, that I'd left this kid behind who was this dreamy, creative kid who loved to write and wanted to write stories or do something very creative. And so I thought I had the opportunity to do a creative writing course. And I thought, I'm going to give that to myself as a 50th birthday present.
Brilliant.
And see what happens. And it took a long time from there. There were a lot of rejections. And then eventually, I wrote something that people were interested in, and I got signed and got a book deal, and here I am.
You've compressed there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I read somewhere 70 rejections, 70 rejections.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point where you're thinking, come on, the time to give up, or were you just determined to make it happen?
A bit of both. I mean, I went through a lot of heartache. I mean, it wasn't just 70 rejections in one manuscript. I did rewrite it and send it out again and whatever. But, I didn't have enough craft. I didn't have any mentoring. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I did feel lots of times that maybe I was kind of like the terrible X Factor contestants that their family think they're wonderful and have been telling them they're great singers. And then they get put on a public stage and utterly humiliated. And I was kind of thinking, maybe I'm that. Maybe, my husband saying to me, oh, well, I think you're really brilliant. And I said, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But it was hard. And every time you get rejection, because there's nobody really on the other side that you're not actually sharing Christmas dinner with, that is going to say to you, no, you're actually quite a talented writer. You just need the right project. Because publishing's a business. They're not just recruiting talented people. They need a project they can sell.
Yeah.
That's the bit you're missing. And if you go back and maybe start something else and, or maybe work on your craft a little bit more, you can make this. And that took me quite a long time to get to the point where I had somebody who actually said that to me.
Brilliant. And your debut, That Green-Eyed Girl. Now, I don't want to get too hung up on this, but I know we have listeners who are over 50, are over 60, thinking, oh, I'm past it, I'm too old to get published. It's not true. That Green-Eyed Girl was published when you were 61, is that correct?
It came out, just a couple of months before I turned 61. I signed my book deal with Penguin just, I think, a few weeks before I turned 60. So nobody in publishing is interested in how old you are at all. They're interested in how good you are. Yeah. Do you have a book that they can sell in the marketplace? That's all that matters. Can you do the work? And I would say this, that, being an older author is very much welcomed in publishing because you have such a wealth of experience. But it is also a job. I work extremely hard at this, and also at the marketing and all the promotional stuff that you have to do. It's not just writing stories.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But it's great, and age should not put anybody off having a crack at this.
100% agree. Totally agree. Also, you're a filmmaker as well. You've written and directed several short films, one of which, BabyCakes, which stars Margaret John, who listeners might know from District Nurse and Game of Thrones, won Best Film Award at the Swansea Film Festival. I think Ken Russell was a judge. What did you learn from your filmmaking that you sort of ported over into your novel writing, if anything?
I started kind of filmmaking. That kind of led me into writing, really, because part of filmmaking I was doing was script writing. And I actually thought I preferred the writing part. I like jobs you can do in your pajamas, generally. Also, I found filmmaking frustrating because you can write a really good script, and financing often to try and make a film is such a frustrating process, and then you can't see your baby made out into the world, whereas if you write a book and you can get published, or you can even self-publish a book, so you can get that creative work out to some kind of an audience. So but it's very helpful in terms of getting to the meat of the story. I think there's not much time for waffle in a film script. Everything has to be show. Everything has to be this happens, then that happens, then that happens, then that happens. Every scene needs to have a purpose because every scene costs money. Yes. So I think if you take that into your writing, it's probably pretty helpful, actually.
Excellent stuff. And is the filmmaking behind you now, or do you still have ambitions to make more films?
I think the filmmaking, in terms of the directing and stuff, is probably behind me because I prefer writing. But I may kind of turn some of my books into screenplays if I have the time to, if I ever get the time to actually have an extra project on top of the books I'm contractually obliged to provide. But I am very tempted, particularly with Dove Street, actually, to I think 73 Dove Street is quite a cinematic
very much so,
book, and I really think that could make quite a good screenplay. So I'm tempted to adapt that.
Fantastic. Excellent. Let's go back to your debut as well, because you sort of skimmed over that Green-Eyed Girl. You were talking about publishers are looking for a project, they're looking for something that they can sell. Did you know that there was something different about that Green-Eyed Girl that felt commercial, that felt like it was ready to be published? Was there something about it you thought, this is the one?
I think so. I didn't set out to be deliberately more commercial. It just felt like a more realized project in my mind. I think when you first start to write, you often have so many themes that can often be quite confusing to you as much as anything. And I was guilty of, I think, one of the major sins of people who are trying to get published. We send things out too early because we want that mentoring, we want some validation. We want to have our homework marked. Yeah. And when it comes back, which is often just silence or that formal response of, terribly sorry, not for me at this time. it's heartbreaking. But what we haven't done is we haven't fully thought through, we maybe haven't fully realized the project and actually thought, what is this book about, actually? What is it that I want to say? And also, there can be a temptation when you want to get published more than you actually want to write something that's authentic to you, which is critical. I think in the beginning, I wanted that kind of validation of saying, I've written a book, I've published a book. When I came to write That Green-Eyed Girl, because I'd been through so many rejections, I thought, I don't care actually what anybody thinks. It may never be published, but I'm going to write something that I'm really proud of. And that is something I want to say about women's lives and the complications of women's lives, which is my thing and what all my books are really focused on, and the nuances and the multiple layers and complexities. And I thought, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make myself proud of this story. And if I get to that point and someone else is interested, great. And if not, I'm no worse off. Yeah. It's a good use of my heartbeats, as my husband used to say to me, you know.
That's a great
And
one.
so that's what I did. That's what I did. I kind of let go of the need to have other people mark my homework and just thought, I'm really proud of this book. Let's see. And here we are.
Is that also, that might be a thing of age, because I turned 50 this year and I'm rapidly giving less and less of a tinker's cuss about what people think. And it's something, when you're in your 20s and 30s, you are desperately, what are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
And that sort of fades in the 40s a bit. But now I just don't care anymore. I'm going to do what I want to do. It's very liberating, isn't it?
Oh, it's so liberating. It is so liberating. And I just think, you know, I can only be me, and nobody else can write my books. There are many other great writers out there. There may be writers who are better than I am at all kinds of things, but nobody can write in the way that I write, because nobody else has my history and my tiny little weird obsessions and the things I'm fascinated with. So what you will get is the best Julie Owen Moylan book I can give you. I can't give you, you know, an Anne Patchett book or a Hilary Mantel book or a Sarah Waters book, if only I could. But, you know, I can only give you the best Julie Owen Moylan book. And I think once you get that, that's great. That's liberation, because then that opens up this whole creative world that you think, well, who am I? What am I fascinated by? What do I have to say? And it ceases to be about just, I must get published, I must get a book deal, I must get an agent, oh my God, what am I doing? And it becomes this real artistic journey that you think, hang on, I really am a kind of creative artist here. I'm trying to explore all kinds of sides of me and sides of women, and I'm trying to do that through story. And that fascinates me on a daily basis, kind of thing. So
absolutely,
not when I'm first drafting that I am cursed.
You mentioned the tiny weird obsessions, and I think those are the things that maybe when we're younger we try and suppress because we don't want to be too different. But actually, it's the tiny weird obsessions that readers love, isn't it? It's and the tiny things that you think are weird to you and only you understand. It turns out there are loads of people out in the world who get this as well. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I wrote That Green-Eyed Girl, one of the things I've always been quite weirdly obsessed with is cities. I mean, most people love nature, and I think nature's pretty, but I'm a city girl, and I love cities. I love the fascination of how many people have walked down those streets before you? And I'm fascinated with houses. I love those movies where you get that New York cityscape and then the camera zooms in to one apartment building and then one window. And I'm like, oh my God, I am so totally obsessed with who's lived in that house before you or who's walked down that street, and that kind of sliding doors kind of coincidence kind of thing. And I just explored that obsession to death for my first novel, really. I was just kind of, I find this really fascinating. And then all these people come, with all the readers who've come out and say, oh, I love that too. Yes, that fascinates me too.
It's brilliant. It's all about making that connection, isn't it? Well, Julie, what you mentioned book 3, you mentioned you're writing a detailed plan. Is there anything you can tell us about it yet, or do you prefer to keep that under your hat?
No, I can tell you a little bit about it. I mean, it's going to be, hopefully, maybe, if I write to the plan, a sister saga. It's complicated sisters. It's set in Berlin, and it will hopefully take these complicated sisters through from kind of 1920s through to maybe 1960s. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a lot of research. I've had to do a lot of research.
Wow.
Oh my goodness me. But it fascinates me. And so I am exploring those weird fascinations.
Brilliant. And is it the epic scope of it that's made you think, okay, I need to plan this out? Or was there another reason for that? Or was it just the scale of it?
Pure fear. Pure fear. Yeah. I looked at the scale of it and I thought, because when I did That Green-Eyed Girl, I did two historical time periods, kind of 1950s and 1970s. But I actually grew up in the 1970s, so I remember the 1970s. Yeah. So I don't really have to do very much research for that. And then this one was kind of 1958. And a lot of the details of it are not unfamiliar to me, because a lot of those ways of like pubs and things were the same in 1958 as they were when I was working in them in the late 1970s, you know. But this is terrifying in the scale of it, that 3 different time periods, 3 sections, I think it will be. And in a city that, you know, I've never lived in. And so, yeah, I mean, I did study history and as part of it, as my degree subject. And so I have studied it at that level. But yeah, the scale of it made me so scared I had to make a plan. And now my characters are doing things that are not on the plan. And I tweeted this morning, and this is exactly how I'm feeling today of first drafting, after having written 2 novels, that I feel like I'm at base camp in the Himalayas. You know, in my flip-flops and a t-shirt, looking at the snowy peaks and thinking, that's a long way up there, and I do not feel at all prepared. But one way or another, I'm going to wrestle this thing to the ground, and we are going to have a book next year.
Fantastic. I know that feeling all too well, being at the foot of the mountain and thinking, oh, here we go again. You know,
yeah.
But it sounds amazing, sounds incredible, and we can't wait to read it. So Julie, thank you so much for your time today. Folks, 73 Dove Street is out there now. Grab a copy. You will not regret it. It's absolutely brilliant. And Julie, great to speak to you, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Mark.
What are your writing dreams? Finishing that book, quitting the day job, becoming a best-selling author? Well, over 4 years, we've studied the advice of over 300 best-selling authors who've collectively sold over 500 million books. And we are excited to announce the Bestseller Academy. If you're ready to take your writing to the next level with accountability, craft, and coaching, your bestseller dreams are now only a click away. To find out more and apply, visit bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. That's bestsellerexperiment.com/academy. God, I tell you what, Mark, when I was listening to that interview, I was thinking how many people listening to that interview along with us are sitting there and were in that position that Julie was in her midlife, thinking, yeah, I really need to do this. I really want to do this, but I don't know really where to start. Or maybe I just don't feel I have the support that I need to give this its best crack. But what a story. I mean, midlife, mature student. She went and learned her craft.
Yep.
But for me, such an amazing way of putting it, that she felt like she had abandoned her creativity. Isn't that just a brilliant way of putting it? I think there's a lot of people that feel like they've put all their creative side of their life on the sidelines, in the wings of their play, of their life, so to speak, and just left it there with the intention that one day they're going to pick it up. And I just wonder how many people listening to this right now going, yeah, that's me. That's absolutely me.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's seen, if you've got bills to pay, you've got family, you've got to put a roof over your head, get food on the table, that kind of thing. It's sometimes it's seen as maybe it's frivolous, or maybe it's just put away childish things, or maybe it was just a pipe dream or whatever. But actually, this stuff is so important. It's so important to be creative, and if it's something that brings you happiness, if it's something that injects a bit of life and soul into you. I mean, we just saw with the writer's strike, we just saw that people miss it when new things aren't coming on. They panic when your favorite film or whatever has been delayed a year because the actors aren't around for it. This stuff is really, I remember I did some plays with the Unity Theatre in Camden when I was sort of in my early 20s. And one of the actors there remembered an actor's strike, I think in the 60s. And I made a joke, did anyone notice? And he was like, yeah, they really did. And he it was the director, actually. He gave me a bit of a bollocking. He was like, what we do is important. He was like, this is telling stories, how we make sense of the world. It's making some kind of emotional connection through storytelling is what sets us apart from the beasts.
But also from the day-to-day side of things, I think a lot of people, really what I picked up from Julia is there was this kind of this void in her life that she just was pining for, and knew that there was this big part of her life that wasn't getting fed. And I tend to think of, life is all about balance, and obviously a lot of people got very long hours doing their day jobs. They've got kids to look after, parents to look after. The sandwich generation now with funding kids going to college and looking after parents in their old age. I mean, and so there's all this stuff happening. And what often I always think of nurses. I remember meeting a nurse once, and she said, I spend all my day looking after patients, and it's hard work. And then I come home, and then I spend all my evening looking after the kids and my husband. And then I flop into bed completely knackered and think, hang on a minute, I had nothing, not even a minute to myself today to do what I wanted to do. And so I think there's this really important part of being a writer and owning it, giving yourself an excuse or a reason to just do those 200 words a day, those 15 minutes a day, because it's a bit like having that balanced diet. Like, writing's like your vegetables in some way. It nurtures you. It's probably one of the most healthiest things you can do for yourself in terms of working through your own things, but also just acknowledging that you're worth, in the words of L'Oreal, you're worth it. You're worth the 15 minutes, just to gift yourself that time. And when it's not there at all, when there's this void like Julie was talking about, I think we start to kind of shrivel up a bit. As human beings, like if we don't exercise that creative muscle, it starts to atrophy. And then, one day we wake up and you just almost feel like creatively dead. And so the fact that Julie recognized that, and she didn't then use the next excuse, which most people use, which is, well, it's too late now. I should have done that in my 20s. I should have gone to and telling herself that story, which I know a lot of people have done, and they put this off and off and off. But here's someone who I think it was in her 50s, really, she was probably getting started. And then she got published at 61. Is that right?
Yeah. I think she got the deal when she was 60 and the book was at 61.
Amazing.
And as she said, publishers don't care. I know there is this impression, particularly, it depends on your genre. Like if you're writing Yalc, a lot of, Yalc, YA, but if you go to Yalc, all the authors are of a certain age, mid-20s to sort of late 30s, because they're writing to their own generation, if you like. But, and that's not to say older people can't write YA, of course they can. But publishers, all they care about is, do I love it? Can I sell it? And if you happen to be of a certain age, they don't care. I mean, my Aunt Marion, I think she was published around about the same age when she did her biography. I think she was about 60 something, and that was an Irish Times bestseller. And and to be fair, that was probably the only time she could write that book. She couldn't have written it 20 years previously. So sometimes it's the time is right. Sometimes it's about you are ready for something that perhaps you weren't ready for before. So don't think of it as, I've wasted time or I've started too late. Think of it as now is the time. The time
now is the right time. Yeah. And I like to think of that fatalistically. If people are thinking I should have done it in my 20s and my 30s, even 40s or even 50s, it wasn't right for you at that point because things were happening in your life that prevented you from doing it. But if you're sitting here listening to this right now, or walking or driving, and thinking, okay, this is a message from the universe for me, I need to get on this. I want to give you all a challenge. If you're listening to this today and this conversation, Julie's interview, is inspiring you to step across that threshold and you're going to do it, drop us a note. Tell us that you're going to do it. Tell us you're going to go for it. Tell us if you want us to share that on the podcast or not, even if you just want to keep it private between Mark, me and Mark. You may be a bit scared about putting your name out there saying you're going to write a book and all your friends will be like, hang on a minute, did I hear you on the Bestseller Experiment saying you're going to write a book? Even if you don't want us to, just let us know and just say, don't say this out loud, but I'm going to do it. Thank you, to Julie for inspiring me. We want to hear if this is your moment because we want to be cheering you on. And then maybe, 6 months down the road, you might be saying, oh, I finished my first draft. And that's how we see it time and time again, don't we, Mark? People just taking that. It's the mental step across a threshold. You've got to do that first before you even write the first word in many cases. Absolutely. Or the next word.
There was an, and I can't remember who it was, so I won't misremember in case we get sued. But there was an author on Twitter a few weeks ago who basically said, oh, by the time you get to your 40s, you're too exhausted to write. And what was I know, and what was wonderful about that was the tsunami of a backlash of people going, that might be you, Charlie, but it ain't me. It wasn't someone called Charlie. Yeah. It was like, what utter cobblers, I'm 50. I've never felt more, energized as a writer.
There are some things in life that you do get more tired doing as you get older. Doesn't mean you can, when even in my 50s, I was out tackling the garden with brambles the other day and I was knackered. I was like, but I can still do it. The point is with writing is you can write, we can all literally write on our deathbed if we wanted to. So the point is this is one of the things that you're never too old to do. In fact, it becomes more precious the later in life you do it and the longer you do it in life as well. So yeah, get on it, folks. We want to hear from you. And also let's just talk about her rejections as well. I mean, here's someone who started midlife in quotes, whatever that is these days. And then went through the process of all those, 70 rejections.
Yeah.
And then to sign a deal with Penguin, that's absolutely mental, isn't it? That's absolutely brilliant.
And when you hear people go, oh, I've had 10 rejections, I'm giving up. It's like you haven't even begun.
Yeah. Just get the next 20 done and then you can start getting to the serious opportunities.
Exactly. It's and like I've said before, the rejection never goes away. It's a constant. You just have to knuckle down and enjoy the process.
Here's a question. How many publishing companies are there in the world, do you think? How many thousands of publishing companies? What are we talking? I'm going to stab at 50,000. It might be way more than that. Talk about even the small ones, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that if you've only
I'm a publisher.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you've only got 50 rejections, you're not even like 1% of the way in terms of fishing, right? You've got a lot more fish in the pool. So I think the reason being is the weight of one rejection. That first rejection in particular is very heavy. It's hard. It's like it's a no thank you, and it hits you. So, but I think as I'm sure you must build up those calluses. By the time Julie got to her 20th rejection, she's like, all right, bring it on, come on, let's keep going. And she's like, whatever, next. And then she ended up getting after 70. So I just think it's a great reminder to people that part of the process is just getting those rejections.
I think Julie, if she's worked in film as well, will know all about rejection because that is rejection city, rejection capital of the world. Is working in film.
Yeah,
it's just they're constantly saying no, saying no.
Absolutely, brilliant stuff. Now let's also talk about the way that Julie presented this idea of not comparing herself to other people, which is one of the biggest challenges we see all the time. We all do it. We all read the most amazing book and then we're inspired to write, but then we're also depressed thinking, God, how am I ever going to top that or even equal the brilliance of that book? And it's always about comparing. But what Julie said, which I absolutely loved, and I think it's the first time I've heard this on the podcast, she said, I'm going to write the best Julie Owen Moylan book. Mm. And that's the secret, isn't it? That is absolutely, insert name here, right? And it just relieves you of all of that pressure of having to try to become or be the next Stephen King, the next Agatha Christie. It's not about that. It's about who you are going to be as an author and your uniqueness.
I think that comes from finding your voice as well, because when you're starting out, it's like trying on costumes or trying on shoes. It's like, I want to be like this author. I want to be like that author. And you can try it on and see what works and what doesn't and what resonates and blah, blah, blah. And it's definitely worth doing. That's why a lot of people start writing fan fiction, because it lifts the weight of the world building and the character creation. You just totally. I'm going to put on fancy dress and I'm going to pretend to be this person today and we're going to have fun with it. And that's great. But if you want to then move on from fan fiction to your own fiction, then you have at least learned, a lot of the skill set you need to write fiction. But then you have to go, oh, okay, I need to make this about me. This needs to be my voice. It needs to be my stories. And again, talking about those tiny weird obsessions, the things you think no one's going to be interested in are actually the things that probably everyone is going to be interested in, because they won't have come across them before, at least not combined with the package that is you. And that's the important thing. That combination is completely unique in the world. So be as weird and unique and obsessive and strange as you can be.
And that even goes down to your writing as well, and how you see how you see the world. Like that's maybe the thing that makes
that's what I'm talking about. Totally.
It makes it's your uniqueness. It's your kind of secret sauce in some way, which even as individuals we probably don't understand what that fully is. But it means that we're not all carbon copies of each other. So that's the biggest thing to remember, is that you always bring that to your work, no matter who you are, because your life experiences are a unique set of different things which have happened just to you.
But it's learning that you're allowed to do that. A lot of people think they're not allowed. They think, well, if I'm going to write a cozy crime, oh gosh, I suppose it needs to be like Agatha Christie. Or if I'm going to write a horror novel, I guess it needs to be like Stephen King. No. You write you. You make it your version of that.
You can take the chord structure, but write your own lyrics.
Exactly.
I mean, when you think about fan fiction as well, I always think of it a bit like the equivalent of an artist doing a cover version of their favorite song.
Totally.
And they put their own selves to it. And sometimes the cover versions can be better than the originals, because as a reader, you just prefer that different style or that approach. So I love that. I think everyone should remember that. We should all write it out, stick it on our writing wall in front of our monitor or our desk, and say, I'm writing the best, insert your name here book. Right. Yeah. Maybe we should do like custom mugs. Yeah. Custom mugs hidden underneath the merch, haven't we? Yeah. We have talked about merch, haven't we? Now, folks, we've got a lot more that we want to talk about, and we're in the extended edition of this podcast. We're going to cover visual writing. We're going to cover the importance of school career days and beyond. And we've got some riffing on this, because this brings me back. Oh my gosh, brings me back to like secondary school and sitting across that desk from that careers advisor. We're also going to discuss as well the importance of writing in your life. Julie mentioned this idea of a good use of heartbeats. So we're going to talk a little bit about just why it's really important to show up to write in terms of the context of your life. So that if you like a bit of deep life philosophy and inspiration, join us for that. And we're also going to delve deep into the idea of flashback structure, which Julie referenced as well. So if you'd like to join us on the extended, you know what to do, folks. You simply pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support. You sign up to our $10 a month. Is that it? Is that all it is, Mark? $10.
That's all it is.
Ridiculous.
Bargains galore.
What?
Hundreds of hours of free, amazing stuff.
And what that does is every single person that signs up to that is contributing towards the creation of this podcast. It's helping us employ the team that put this together and helps us bring this podcast to you every week. So you'll also get a lovely feel-good feeling. So pop along to bestsellerexperiment.com/support and you'll get another probably 20, 30 minutes of today's podcast exclusively for yourselves and Academy members. So, Mark, tell us what's happening in wins and socials this week.
Well, now you remember last week, Susie Edge got one of those purple number one most gifted flags on Amazon, and we were thinking, I haven't seen that before. Well, Sarah Moorhead, author of The Treatment, she was on the podcast just a few weeks ago. She's got one for her book, The Treatment, as well, and other authors are starting to get them. So this is a whole new thing on Amazon, most gifted, which is wonderful. So if you're looking for the perfect Christmas gift, I recommend The Holly King by Mark Stay. So yeah, congrats to Sarah for that.
Desperate to get that purple flag now, aren't you? Come on, I'm going to get the purple flag.
I've got an orange one. I've had an orange one. I want a purple one now. And speaking of Susie Edge, just amazing. In history bestsellers, Vital Organs #1 in audio and Vital Organs #2 in physical. It's just
brilliant.
Yeah,
isn't that interesting that the audio is #1?
Yeah, she said I was looking up the hardcover of Vital Organs, and it said #2 on the bestseller chart. She said, out of annoyance, I clicked to see who was in #1 position, and it was her audio.
Brilliant.
That's just fantastic. Amazing. Now,
is she still outselling Prince Harry?
Oh, Prince Harry's long gone. Harry.
Long gone.
Yeah, long gone. He's dust. He's dust. Now, you remember last week we read an extract from S.C. Gowland's new book, Delusions and Dragons, where we featured in that. Well, turns out that wasn't the first time. You know, Mike Shackle got in touch, and I'm a murder victim. In his book, The Killing Game. Me and Andrew Chapman. Not you. You get off. So not only do you get an extra chapter in Steve Gowland's book, but you don't get murdered in Mike's book. Oh, so yeah, I'm a murderer. And well, actually, Andrew Chapman is a detective sergeant. He's DS Andrew Chapman. And I'm Mark Stay, 18, murdered on the 12th of December. Great. Thanks.
I'll tell you, actually, a couple of months on the theme, yesterday I was in a stand-up comedy class, and one of the guys was telling us a story about how he had a true story, because we're near Vancouver, which is a big film world. He was the first dead body in The Flash, episode 1, season 1. Yeah, I think the scene opens with him lying on the floor and they're looking at his body and trying to work out. And he said they had no idea at the time, obviously, that it was going to become this massive 9-series success story when it became. And he said he was chuffed to bits when he was on it, but when he found out how successful he was completely gutted, because being a dead body in the first opening scene of The Flash kind of pretty much limits your opportunities for the rest of the series. But yeah.
Well, you say that they have people back again and again. It does happen. Now, you've signed up to your little stand-up comedy thing, which if you listen to the extended folks, you'll hear more of that. And listen, you've got to record one of this. You've got to do your tight 5 minutes when it's all done. But so if we're confessing little things like that, I've signed up to an extras agency. I just got some work as well. I'm doing some extras work. I want to get on film sets and TV sets. You learn so much just from being on sets.
I've been thinking about that. I know some friends that do this. Even in Cambridge, and they end up getting pulled in and they get dressed up for the day.
Vancouver,
they get, down the road in Ladysmith, which is about not far from where I live, they actually filmed the Sonic movie with Jim Carrey, and then the Sonic 2 movie. Yeah, we have a ton of, the series Alone, which is the kind of, people getting dumped in the middle of nowhere and having to survive the longest. Right. That's filmed on the island. We've had the Manchester, what's that film with?
Manchester by the Sea.
By the Sea was filmed in Ucluelet. This whole, and Superman was filmed, because we've got honestly, it looks like Chile. It looks like, Jurassic Park with all of the crazy trees and things. There's so many different options. And then Vancouver, massive film. A lot of them, big productions happen there as well. But I can't. Okay, so that'll be a little theme over the next year. Maybe give us a bit of stories as an extra. I love it.
Well, we'll see. We shall see. There's no guarantee of work. And a lovely little win, which comes from the Academy. Karen Story, who is just,
knocking it out of the park.
Absolutely. And we were talking about newsletters on the Wednesday night surgery. And I said, look, start right now. And she said, while watching the surgery, her Persian cat, Tiffany, was making a pest of herself, jumping on my desk, walking over the keyboard. And a spark of inspiration hit. She said, I'm going to let Tiffany write the newsletter. And she managed to drum up a list of 30 people for a newsletter, and she wrote, and I subscribed to it, and she wrote a newsletter as written by her cat's point of view. And it was absolutely brilliant. It was really funny. And what happened is people were now talking about Tiffany's newsletter on Facebook, and people who don't know Karen are now subscribing to her newsletter. So this is it. All it takes is a little bit of different thinking, a little bit of left field. Okay, let's do something different. So
I think she said she came home and she found out that her newsletter list had doubled in literally a day or two. But the thing I love about it, I mean, not just how brilliant an idea it is. I mean, I know you kind of inspired it, I'm sure, like with your librarian from the Woodville Library, right? But the point, the brilliance of using that third party makes it more fun to write rather than having to come up with something yourself every time. But she called it Breakfast. Was it Active or with Tiffany?
With Tiffany's,
Tiffany's, which I just think's great. So, I mean, what an opportunity to use your creative muscles. There's your 200 words a day, folks, as well. If you said, I just haven't managed to get my newsletter started, 200 words a day, you'll write on one day a week. You'll write your newsletter, get that out each week, and start building that future or current fan base. Today. Brilliant. Well done, Karen. Excellent.
So, folks, if you want to get in touch, we're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. So Facebook is Bestseller Experiment. Twitter, Instagram, Threads is @BestsellerXP. If you've been inspired by Julie or any of the authors who've been on podcast, give us a rating. It really helps. Or just subscribe. Clicking that subscribe button really, really definitely helps. Thanks, as always, to our editors, Dave and JD.
Brilliant stuff, folks. And if you'd like to join the 200-word challenge, can you write consecutively for 7 days, 200 words? That's all it takes. You think it's easy? It's not easy. Give it a go, folks. 200wordchallenge.com and get the writing habit for a lifetime. Pop along to that web address. And also, if you'd like to get on our newsletter, join our mailing list and join many, many thousands of Bestseller Experiment fans and listeners, you go to the bestsellerexperiment.com website and click on the newsletter tab. And folks, don't forget to join us next week for our special 7th birthday edition, and we look forward to celebrating with a very special author, as we previewed at the beginning of this podcast. So do join us then. Thank you for everyone who's been with us on this journey so far for 7 years, and if you're new, you're really, really welcome, and we're looking forward to taking you on an adventure of a lifetime in writing. So it's a goodbye from Mark 1
and a goodbye from Mark 2. Bye.
Goodbye.